This is the zoning committee of the Plan Commission. We have a quorum, and the first item of agenda is approval of the minutes of the last meeting.
Move approval of the minutes of the last meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Is there discussion or corrections? Oh, you have to do this. You're the chair.
Any discussion or corrections? Okay, so moved. The next item of business has been forwarded to August 21st. That's 13 PLND-0065.
I move that this meeting be continued to August 21st at 7 o'clock here in the Civic Center.
Do we need a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Is a motion to adjourn in order?
There is a motion to adjourn in order.
Not adjourn. I guess we just continue, so we don't have to adjourn. This is now the Evanston Plan Commission meeting, and we do not have a quorum, but we do not plan to take any action, just to hear a short presentation and get feedback. The Comprehensive Plan Subcommittee has been meeting for a year on a regular basis, doing a lot of reading about comprehensive planning, and it has reached some conclusions which we thought would be appropriate to share with the full commission. So, absent the full commission, we'll share it with those who are here. I have a PowerPoint slide that summarizes it, and if you could put that up on the screen, that would be great. I can put it up on the screen? Ah. Blank. Terrific.
Wow. I think then you have to use your laptop.
It's not running on my laptop. And how do I move it forward? Maybe the right arrow. Maybe the left arrow. A down arrow. Maybe a select arrow.
Something happened. I think it was working. Oh. Something happened. There you go. Maybe the battery is low. Sorry.
So we've reached certain conclusions. The plans made from 1972 until recently expressed people's desire for what they wanted for their community, but often didn't take into account the lack of resources and the need for trade-offs. And starting about the year 2000, 2005, there was a recognition that the municipal resources are not endless. And certain assumptions made by the committee, together with that recognition, are shown on the screen. The plan is about improving the community. The objective isn't a good plan, but a good community. And we have to deal with trade-offs. That means the plan has to acknowledge limited resources and the need for choices, and it should reflect the choices of the community. Ultimately, the City Council decides what to include and whether to approve a plan. The zoning changes permit consideration of one proposal at a time, either a zoning change or a PUD. And usually what's emphasized are the needs of those living near the property, the opinion of the relevant alderman. A comprehensive plan allows consideration of Evanston's citywide needs, and it allows the city to respond to expected changes in the environment before they happen. It's the context for strategic planning of the physical environment and future infrastructure needs. A good plan, the process of creating it, should result in a set of decisions about the desired direction for the community. And the plan should include sections on desirable actions that will lead to a good community. And that's something that's become common in the last 10, 15 years, and that was absent from many earlier plans. So it is a record memorializing decisions made by the committee and the council. This slide shows the typical chapters in a traditional plan that might have been developed anywhere in the U.S. From 1972, when the federal government began funding plans, until about 10, 15 years ago. And our two most recent comprehensive plans pretty much fit this kind of organization. And you can find support for almost anything somewhere in that plan. So when we get to the point in a zoning hearing, is it consistent with the comprehensive plan? It'll always be consistent with part of the plan and inconsistent with other parts. The subcommittee proposes a different kind of organization. Chapter on changes in the economic environment, demographics, citizens' preferences, and technology. And for Evanston, that's probably the most important for reasons that I'll talk about shortly. Focus, as prior plans did, on the strengths, opportunities, and weaknesses of the city. And here is something different, finding solutions to the major issues and problems facing Evanston. We have in Evanston a series of neighborhood plans. The status under Illinois law of neighborhood plans is not entirely clear unless they're incorporated into the citywide comprehensive plan. So part of the task will be to incorporate the neighborhood plans. When I made a presentation to the council, almost identical to what I'm explaining tonight, one of the councilmen, it was a councilwoman, pointed out we need to look at the neighborhood plans and see if they're still appropriate. So we have undertaken that exercise and will continue to, and we'll bring that to the full commission. So the plan will be organized around goals. Chapter titles might include things like maintaining and increasing manufacturing jobs, responding to the land use preferences of Gen X and Gen Y that differ from those of the soon-to-be aging baby boom cohort, preserving development space and providing infrastructure to support economic development. The economic development issue in Evanston is hard because we are a fully built-out community, but it's something we need to consider and something that can be done. The traditional information would also be included. The demographic changes we're expecting include the aging of the baby boomers, who for the last 40 years have demonstrated a preference, at least many of them, for wide lawns, low-density suburbs where uses are separated and access to amenities or work required a trip in the car. As the baby boomers age, a substantial proportion have and will be giving up the wide lawns and low-density suburbs and looking for a community where less driving is needed and where the costs associated with widely separated uses are high. The retirees want costs that are lower. The Gen X and Gen Y cohort groups have radically different residential preferences. About 60% are similar to the baby boomers, but their economic status is not as clear due to very heavy educational debt. And 40% of them prefer age-friendly communities with public transportation and lots of options for housing, lifelong learning, robust arts and culture, walkability. In short, they like what Evanston has and could offer. 50% of Evanston's population is part of Generation X and Generation Y. It has something to do with the university, but also with all of the other amenities here. So we have talked about quality of place. I won't read this slide to you, but this is from Richard Florida's work. And the groups that I mentioned frequently will use this definition in looking for places to live. So this set of preferences is a little different than what we would have seen developing a plan 15 or 20 years ago. It gives us some opportunities here in Evanston. Other items that need to be addressed are listed on the slide called Other Topics. You have already begun to see the use of 3-lane roads, such as Sheridan Road going north from here, to make the streets more friendly to pedestrians and bicyclists, and there are opportunities for that here. We want to maintain housing opportunities, different kinds of housing for people at many different income levels. Preserving manufacturing jobs is particularly important here, and I have seen the figure of 5,000 jobs, non-retail, commercial, and manufacturing jobs in Evanston. It's not clear that it's accurate, but if it is, we want to maintain it. We want to try and have economic development for people with differing skills, and also to improve the fiscal health of the city. So, we've done a lot of reading. That sort of summarizes some of the important things that we have to undertake, and then we get to next steps. Two phases in participation. The first phase is intended to reach out and get people's ideas. What do they see as the problems? What do they want for the future of the city? And the initial steps in doing that are listed on this slide, and that would culminate in the writing of a draft plan sometime late fall. Now, it turns out when I've been involved with doing comprehensive planning and when others have done comprehensive planning in other places, and I think also here, initially there's not a lot of public participation. You'll notice the crowd is not monstrously huge tonight. But when you have a plan and people look at it and see how they're affected, the room fills. So the second phase is getting feedback on the draft plan. Hopefully we can do that in the winter, revise it for early spring, hold formal public hearings, and by late spring or summer of 2014, it would be submitted, approved by the Plan Commission, and submitted to the council to whatever fate it awaits it. So that's an outline of a year and a half's work. Some of the traditional chapters have already been written during Craig's Glenar's tenure, but the items I've just talked about have not been written. There's a lot of material, written material, supporting the assertions in this presentation, and if the group here thinks it's appropriate, we will we will send emails to everyone every time there's a posting of material relating to the comprehensive plan, so that the full commission, if they desire, can begin considering the progress of the subcommittee. And with that, I want to ask those who are here, I want to ask the entire Plan Commission, but instead I will ask those who are here for feedback, comments, suggestions, criticisms, etc. Also, I will ask you to think about who the stakeholders are that should be involved and how we reach them.
Is one of our goals to include some method of measuring whether the stated goals in the plan are achieved?
In the new plan or the old plan?
The new one.
We could include an addendum on that, and then going forward, that could be done.
Or at least put the process of how you measure.
Yeah.
Oh.
There is a committee of the American Planning Association that has been meeting for 3 years for the purpose of assessing comprehensive plans and their implementation. And I will send some of their material, particularly the items you don't have to pay for, so they can be posted, and at least you can see some of that. That's a good idea.
In line with that, do any municipalities offer, say, annual reviews of the plan and what has happened in the past year, and sort of an ongoing evaluation?
I don't know of anyone doing annual reviews because the time frame of the plan is long. Some of the things that I just described, we expect to happen in over 10 years. But a review mechanism is a good idea.
I've always sort of looked at the comprehensive plan as a guide, and I am not a member of the Plan Commission subcommittee, or the comprehensive plan subcommittee. So I'm shooting a little bit from the hip here, but I get a sense that you don't want the new version of the comprehensive plan to be a guide. You're looking at it more as a blueprint going forward. Is that correct?
I think we are thinking of it more of being more of a guide than the current plan, but recognizing that everything is not possible. So the current plan, for example, emphasizes public transportation and non-automobile performance, and then emphasizes increasing the roadways and automobile performance, and does not look at the fact that there's a trade-off. It emphasizes low-density development and also the higher density development.
Excuse me for interrupting just a moment. Doesn't the multimodal plan address what you just talked about?
It addresses it by calling for all of it. And we could be more specific as we go forward. I mean, it's all there in the current plan. It's just the trade-offs aren't clear. So if you think about the Main Street, Chicago Avenue area, and the Main Street area west of Chicago Avenue, it calls for many things, but you can't develop it in all ways. If you start increasing the density and making sure you have parking and amenities so there's no interference with the neighborhood to the east, then it can't be developed. I'm talking about a 5-minute walk from the station, not a big area. It can't be developed consistent with the pictures in the right and left because the densities are higher. So, and often I think Evanston development, optimal development for Evanston won't be the same in all places. So northwest Evanston, Central Street would be developed and have developed differently than Chicago Avenue. And that's the kind of thing that would provide more guidance. And I'm not criticizing the 2 prior plans. Indeed, I worked on one, not the most recent plan, but the prior one. I'm just saying there's sort of nationally a recognition to begin to confront some of the trade-offs as part of the planning process.
What impact, for example, would this have? I know we spent a couple of years on the Central Street plan. What impact would the new proposed comprehensive plan have on the Central Street plan or the West Side plan or the downtown plan?
Unless people suggest otherwise, I think ultimately, we haven't had the process yet, but I think ultimately the conclusion will be the Central Street plan should be incorporated, almost verbatim. And downtown, we've gone through this extensive process, and I think that one too would be incorporated verbatim. The Chicago Avenue study, which technically isn't a plan, but is a study because the council hasn't adopted it. The changes on the ground are not consistent with what happened on the plan, so there I would expect some change. On the west side, there's areas that are shown as residential, and it might be that other areas will be added to that plan to try and preserve the manufacturing. So there's some detail work and some participation that would be necessary. Most of our neighborhood plans are great, I think. I don't know.
Would you incorporate these plans, for example, the downtown plan, by reference, or would you incorporate it verbatim?
I would incorporate it by reference, unless we discover that things such as what we found on Chicago Avenue, where the events on the ground are now make parts of the plan obsolete. Okay. Alderman Rainey suggested we look pretty carefully at all the plans, but having looked at some of them, I think they can be incorporated by reference. And then in terms of a zoning hearing, if we have things contested, the legal status would be much more clear.
You'll forgive me for taking pot shots, and I am definitely shooting from the hip because I have just perused your memo, and I want to encourage you to keep going here. And I remember the downtown plan took about 3 years. So don't feel any urgency here to get through it in a fixed number of months. These things take a lot of time.
Well, we thought maybe we'd try to finish while there are still staff employed in Evanston in planning. It may well be that it can't be done on the timetable I just described, but it's a good target. Other comments?
Just to address some of Stuart's concern, we went over the say, for instance, the West Evanston plan. And a lot of what we found, and we had several people looking at it, was just upgrades, things that needed to be brought up to date. There were some changes. There were references made. To National Louis University as being one of the educational facilities here. So it was a matter of editing it out. But I don't remember anything that was really a structural or major change. It was more just trying to clean it up in terms of the references inside. You were on, looked at some of them, Lenny. Did you find it? Yeah.
The one thing that stood out to me was obviously some of the data. Well, there's the data content that you mentioned, but in terms of actual usability for the reader and how we go about disseminating the information in terms of on the internet and really making it a document that people that they can read and that they can use and that they can understand was, I think, one of the things that stood out to me in reviewing what was the existing comprehensive plan and looking at some of the other plans that Evanston has. So hopefully that's something that we'll be addressing, because I don't really think it's I mean, I've kind of indicated it's kind of a futile exercise if we aren't able to at least try to produce a product that people are actually going to use other than in litigation. It'd be nice to be used for other purposes.
I mean, one of the changes in planning style, in the style for comprehensive plans, is to have action items, and that wasn't done. So, and preferably, you might have a set of preferences, some of which appear to be attainable, and some of which would be very difficult to attain. So for example, there was a community in New York adopting a new style plan, and they were pretty much cut off from the world. The plan recognizes that the city council and almost all the population would like an interstate. And then the plan goes on to recognize that that's unlikely, and it provides some alternative connections to the rest of the world beyond the two-track that existed there. So we may find that there are things we would like to do in Evanston. We put them in. But if it looks like they're impossible, we go beyond that and have proposed near future action plan. And we put them in, I think, to express that's the citizens' preferences. It's not a process that's entirely technical. I mean, if we propose economic development, it has to go somewhere, and then there are impacts, and there are people and neighborhoods that want it, and many that don't. But if we think on a citywide basis, it's really important here. I think this city, and I'm wanting to not criticize the earlier plans. I think the planning and the government affairs in Evanston that affect land use have made this city thrive in a way that other inner ring suburbs haven't. Yes, we have the university and lake, but this is a remarkable success story. And I think the public sector and citizen participations had a lot to do with it. So I hope we will now see some of the environmental changes thrust upon us, and demographic changes, changes in the cost of oil and so on, and we will take advantage of them. Good.
I don't know if any of you saw the article on Golub's repurchase of the Orrington office building, but it and related articles went on in a similar manner to expound upon what a unique environment Evanston's downtown is, that this office building behaves really more as a city office building as opposed to a suburban office building, and that its market is very unique, very attractive, and growing for the very reasons that transit-oriented development expound upon. And I reflect back 10 or 15 years ago and think that that kind of an article wouldn't have been written then. And in fact, at that time, that building had a very high vacancy rate. So here, it's being held up with, I think its occupancy is over 90%, like 92% right now. There's plans for a restaurant in the rotunda, I believe. And it was, well, it simply substantiated the very uniqueness of Evanston as a place to live, which is somewhere between a city and a suburb.
To your remarks, David, and to your remarks, Scott, I would say hear, hear. We are very fortunate to live in this community that is so vital and wonderfully thriving.
And another thing that was encouraging to me was that there seems to be now, the city's been working towards trying to implement more office occupancy and transportation nodes. So it seems to me that this kind of an article can do nothing but encourage that kind of development, maybe in other areas of the city, whether it be Main Street or other transportation nodes. And to my mind, that can only be a good thing.
I think the subcommittee has focused on that, and then the next focus is how do we do it without any adverse impact? Because to do this, we need the political support, not only of the areas that you're referring to, but of other parts of the city. And I don't have to tell commissioners who have been to so many hearings that people are easily threatened. So we have to demonstrate some change that's thrust upon us and how our response can benefit the city and not harm constituencies. Any suggestions on stakeholder groups and how to reach out to them? I know the next subcommittee meeting is going to begin to deal with that issue. Hearing no comments, it's not too late. We will keep working on this summer. Are there
Scott, I think once it gets to the Plan Commission level, once a draft emerges from the committee,
then there will be many people.
Then there's going to be a peanut gallery full of folks with comments and suggestions. Before that, at the committee stage, I don't think you can look for a lot of participation. That's my experience.
That's how it happens in every place that I've observed comprehensive planning. Except maybe
with the exception of I'm sorry. Yeah.
Ms. Feldman?
Never mind. Yes, with the exception of Ms. Feldman, of course, who goes to all the committee meetings.
Did I get it right? Oh, good. Do you have anything you want to bring to our attention? Please identify yourself. You don't have to be under oath since this is not a
It's not a meeting?
it's
not
sort
a
of
hearing.
briefing.
It's
We don't
hearing.
actually. We don't. Associate member.
One, two, three, four. Me. Aren't you a member?
He doesn't count.
2.
Oh, he's an associate now. That's right. I forgot. Okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just want to point out some things to remember. Having been one of a few people who showed up at Downtown Plan, almost all the time, there was a feeling at those meetings, even though they started at 7:30 in the morning, that the public was always welcome, and it was out there on the airwaves, that the public was always welcome. Repeated, announced, talked about it, community meetings and such, even though people didn't show up. And so many times, as it happened with me, of the people in my area who were interested but went to work and early, and I didn't. I got tapped to be the one to show up. And a couple of us did that, and then we shared the information. But this, I think what you have to have is the sense that goes out that you want people to come and they're welcome and they're invited and they know it's happening. Whether they show or not, that's up to them. If you look at the brouhaha that's going on right now about a couple of situations which were first introduced 4 years ago and then not talked about, and then all of a sudden there were results and now we're reacting. Had the community been kept up to date on a progress report along the way, or known that they could have found out, the brouhaha would have been less. People would have remembered what happened 4 years ago, instead of saying, this is all new. So you've got to think of that when you're designing how stakeholders can feel involved. Whether they are or not, it'll make a difference in the long run. Just a fair warning.
Mr. Chairman, I think Evanston wouldn't be Evanston without a few brouhahas, to use your word. I take your point.
There always will be someone. You can try to minimize them, however, and not be taken by surprise.
Anything else? We don't really need a motion to adjourn since we don't have a quorum and we're just having an informal discussion. But is there anyone who would like to have the meeting end?
I would like to say one more thing. I really appreciate all the work that the committee has put into this endeavor. It is no small undertaking, and I applaud your efforts thus far.
Thank you. That sounds like a desire to have the meeting end. Thanks very much.